speaking of that boot camp, Toronto is also at a boot camp in Korea. The same one, if I'm correct. And unlike the Shock, they ended last season going 8-20. But their roster, whoo! Besides Mangachu and Logix, I just did the fucking gnome sound. Woo! Besides Mangachu and Logix as key players, they lost pretty much everyone else, but they did sign Nevix from Shock, Surefour, Kariv, Agilities, Beast, and Kellex, just stacking themselves up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh my god, Surefour. So the GM did this interview. GM Jason, shout out. It was an interview for CA Esports. I assume that stands for Canada Esports. Because, yeah.
Can't be California Esports.
Yeah.
It could be, you never know.
Yeah, they're just like talking about other teams. So, it was a cool interview, and he said some interesting things, and I think that it leads to some of the philosophy behind signing these dudes. But so the GM, Jason said that signing Agilities and Kariv as a package deal was substantially cheaper than just signing Kariv, which on one hand doesn't make sense unless people really hate Agilities for some reason.
Yeah.
Goddamn, I don't know, Agilities wasn't great last season, but was he really that bad where it's like, yo, Kariv, you're top 20 player, incredible, top 5 support, damn, you want to be packaged with Agilities? Oh, damn. You're gonna have to take a pay cut. Oh, you're fine with that? Shit. It's weird.
But, a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very weird. And I think the league fucked up.
Yeah.
I think that hating Agilities for some reason so much could end up being a big mistake, because in Season 1, Agilities was very good. He was very good on a very good LA Valiant team. And last season, he didn't play well, but you can definitely chalk that up to, GOATS being a thing, and then after GOATS, him never being able to find his footing.
Right.
Yeah.
And, he's not like Corey, where just, he can spend 2 minutes on a sniper and suddenly be like, oh my god, he's great, and then he can go back to Zarya and be trash. I think Agilities need some time to warm up.
Yeah.
And so if Agilities ends up being a player on this team and ends up contributing positively to winning Overwatch, that's the biggest steal of the entire offseason, because you get an all-star in Kariv who's not going to suck.
Right.
And then you just get Agilities tacked on because they're best friends, and Agilities ends up being the flex, alright, not god, but the flex, demigod that you needed. And he fits right in, the theory of Agilities fits right in with Surefour and Logix.
Right.
And it's an interesting thing that you can just get him for cheap just because he's packaged with Kariv. And I love him taking the risk on it of being like, you know what? Fuck it. We like Agilities too. We're going to sign both of you.
Yeah.
Because logically, he for sure will work out.
Yeah. I hate you. So a lot of GMs might be crying at the end of the season when
because
they realize,
they fucked that up.
oh, I missed out on Kariv because I didn't want this dude that's actually really good.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's weird to me that the league hates Agilities so much.
Yeah, that is.
Why do you hate Agilities? What did he do?
He came out to play his best, and then
he made that pun I just made. That's what he did.
Exactly.
Poor Agilities, man. But this, if he performs, oh my god, it's great. And then another interesting thing on the DPS side is he said that Surefour can play flex, and he could fit in next to Logix. And this also brings up the idea that if Surefour sucks, this whole team is just going to fall apart. I think that they're hinging on Surefour being an A+ player the entire season.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like they're hinging on him being the player. If they're having him be flex next to Logix, then that means that they want Surefour to fill these roles that they need him on the DPS line. And also, a lot of the times the flex player is the center of the team.
Right.
Because it's just kind of how it ends up being. Sometimes the flex player is better, and Surefour is going to have to be good on a lot of different things. And he said even if double hit scan is a thing, Surefour and Logix
is the move.
Too.
Yeah.
And so if Surefour doesn't perform, which, I mean, he should perform, like, he's really good. But if he ends up being a flex god, then him and Logix is disgusting. Because Logix has always been good. Even when he was on Florida. Florida's game plan back in, like, Season 1 was basically what they do for Saya player now. Of just like, hey, man, hopefully you carry us. Because we ain't gonna help you. And then, like, sometimes you win a fight, sometimes you lose.
Yeah.
And, you know, but Logix has always been very good.
Logix, please. 3 kills?
Yeah, that's even kind of what they did, like, late stage Toronto, where it was like, alright, we have Logix, please? And sometimes he did. Like, you know, so hopefully Surefour ends up being good.
So now their entire strategy is just have each of their players sometimes carry the entire team, and then by that logic, like 70% of the team, one of them will carry them to victory.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if it works, it works.
It works 99% of the time, 100% of the time.
And that would be impressive. Where it's just like, okay, listen.
This is the Surefour game. This is the Logix game.
Yeah, we really need you to go out there for us today. I feel like we talked about that with like some other team.
I don't remember
like
who it was,
that.
but yeah. Okay, Nevix, this one's yours. Like.
It very well could be. I think having Surefour be more flexy will also make the roster even out, because they do have people that will be on the bench, assuming Agilities is on the bench. They'll have people that are on the bench that are also flexy, and if Agilities ends up being just as good as Surefour and they bounce off each other, I think that will really help push this team in a triumphant way.
Yes.
And they have their solid hit scan, and then they have their backup solid hit scan, and then again, no matter where the meta shifts, because like tanks, it just becomes shield or no shield, and then support.
The answer is always shield.
And then support, it just kind of, well, which one has the most healing now? But DPS is kind of where things switch up the most, and I feel like merges in and out of whether...
Sometimes DPS is a tank.
Sometimes. And I feel like no matter what happens now, they have a solid, at least cement flooring to build their defiance off of.
Right.
And, so also...
That was worse.
The Toronto GM talked about signing Beast, who's very inexperienced, but solid tank player, has LAN experience, and he talked about having him with Nevix, who's apparently the greatest player of all time, as sort of this tank duo of the veteran and the young player. And he talked a lot about, you know, how Beast is mature and a very coachable player, and how Nevix, yet again, very coachable player, greatest player ever, and can slot in, and those two can be effective. And I think it's interesting how this roster is built, where you do have 3 leaders. You know, Nevix, a leader, even on the Shock where he never played, he was a leader on that team. He was an example, standout player, and you know, in the locker room, not on the field, but he was a standout player in the locker room. And you know, Surefour, who was a leader on the Gladiators, and Kariv, who was one of the most consistent players and definitely, you know, kind of a leader and a fan favorite when it came to the Valiant. So you have 3 people in each position that are high quality players, work hard, are in-game leaders, and that's something that, you know, teams really struggled with. The Valiant talked about with Custa how important his leadership was to them succeeding.
Right.
So I think having a leader is important, because, you know, you look at bad teams and they don't have a clear number 1 dude on the team.
We got Moth on the San Francisco Shock, where in every single picture, video / thing I see of him, he's just stone cold Steve Austin. And then there's Jae Hong now on the Vancouver Titans. There's Jonak.
Straight up Macho Man Randy Savage.
Who's Miss Elizabeth?
We don't. I just said Jonak as the last person. So
Fran.
Jonak is also a solid, like, older player. So it's like there's teams that have these older dudes that are going to really help drive the force of the teams. And with Nevix now on Toronto Defiant, I think they finally found that, like, or Obi-Wan Kenobi. Or
I was
Yoda.
going to say every Luke needs their Obi-Wan.
Another thing that the GM Jason said is they keep playing Roki every day to get him experience. He plays 1 hour a day scrims despite being a two-way player, which is really cool because we've talked about before how many players have come forward and they're like, hey, I don't get my scrim time. I would rather be on a different team where they'll actually appreciate me and where they'll actually put me into the game. Even if I'm not the best, I'll get the attention from coaches I need and I'll get the support and from my teammates. So it's really cool, especially going into the 2020 season where they already have this idea of where it's like on paper they should be able to be whatever, very flexible to the meta, and then having your like bench players getting time to play, getting time to go out and do things will let him not only get closer with his fellow teammates, but there won't be a divide when there has to be a change. If Surefour's sick, like, of just playing, or anyone, it's like, well, now we have this other person that can come in, and he can play for you at this game. And it's like, that's really good for a team where they're still technically a young team, but they're thinking for the long haul of what the 2020 season and beyond will cause on players.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that it seems like, they're going for is the idea of player development. And the GM seems to have, yet again, I mean, it's an interview, so he's probably saying, what we want to hear. But he seems very into the idea of developing his players holistically and wanting this to be the best team that it can be. And I think that that's important. I think that that's a great way of looking at it is, we want this team to be, a team. Like, we want them to succeed as a unit. And that's something important compared to just, like, bringing a bunch of names in, being like, hey, go play. Which I would believe a lot of teams in the first season and the second season just tried to do.
And we saw it. There were eye injuries on the Dallas Fuel, and they had to bring in people who hadn't played, or...
I mean, the Fuel are the example of just complete distress, Taimu was unhappy on the bench. Harry Hook was happy on the bench. Never got scrim time. A lot of their players just never really ended up developing super well. Dallas just seems like a bad example of just running a franchise, other than Florida. But with Toronto, it seems like they have a very good eye on development, and they're willing to take risks. I think the biggest thing that Kariv and Agilities thing says is that this Toronto team is not afraid to take risks. And they're willing to kind of put themselves out there and make this team work. But, really just kind of like the only other thing really from this interview that I thought were super interesting is he talked and he said, like, they played like 6 or 7 teams. And he feels like Toronto is right in the middle, which I think Toronto is right in the middle. I think they're 12 through 9. They're somewhere in there in terms of ranking. They're not number 1. They're not number 20. A lot of people have Toronto like either number 5 or they have Toronto like number 16. They're like 12, 11-ish. Just a good team, but I think their ceiling is as high as top 5. I think that they have a very high ceiling, just based off of the skill that they have on paper. If things click, it's going to be retarded.
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to be a easy out for anybody.
Yeah.
Correct. Shout out to Toronto, though.
Yeah, no, I think...
Hopefully they don't win 8 games again.
Well, hopefully they win more than 8 games.
And, again...
Yeah, like 14. I bet they're going to win... I bet Toronto is going to win... I ain't giving, like, predictions. We ain't locking this in yet. We got 7 weeks. But I'm going to say Toronto about to mess around and get 15, 16 wins.
I can see that.
Yeah. What, 16 and 12? That seems like an aight record.
Yeah.
They stomp on the bad teams in the league, but can't really get over the hump of, like, the elite teams.
Yeah, they're going to be that perfect middle ground that we said Seoul was last year. The kind of...
Good probably a playoff team, but like,
yeah,
they ain't gonna win in the playoffs.
And Jason also said, because we mentioned a little bit of sick playing the game and maybe just sick in general from traveling, they try and stay very healthy. They do gym time, eat healthy, and obviously that's going into the 2020 season. That's going to be very important that these players aren't just
playing 20 hours a day because that's what you do, bro.
And
grind
like
all day, bro.
Living on just, well, I mean, obviously he said that they drink black coffee, but like not just running on like
Doritos and Mountain Dew,
soda and Monster Energy drinks.
Okay, pull out the MLG horns, boys. It's 2010. Mountain Dew Doritos.
Who is this?
Hedge.
Wow.
Yo, speaking of 2010, shout out to Sea Nanners.